All right, so, excuse me. Let's go ahead and begin with class. So just to remind us from Thursday's first class of the semester, this past week, with our snow day last week, we started off just kind of introducing ourselves, went through the syllabus, and put a pin in a couple of really important ideas for the rest of the semester. And one of those was a detailed outline format for your thesis proposal or your dissertation proposal, so that you guys and gals don't have to reinvent the wheel and figure out what to put in, where to put it in, and how to do those things efficiently so that you can spend less time documenting your work and more time doing your work. We also wanted to take a look through our syllabus. We scrolled very quickly through a long list of potential kind of subtopics throughout our semester so that we can start to customize that towards what everybody is looking for or needs to be successful. So, in order to do those things, let's go kind of around the class one by one and just describe your sort of status. Last week we talked about, what semester are you in? Is this your first, second, third semester? This time let's talk a little bit more about who's your advisor, what's your research area. If not your research topic, it may not be fully fleshed out yet, that's fine. And kind of where you're hoping to get to next with it. Like, are you going to roll, or planning at least to roll this master's into a PhD, maybe even accelerate directly into a PhD? Or are you going to get that paper, get that master's degree, head out, be a practitioner at the master's level, a professional in your field of study, working with an agency or a company or what have you, just to get a sense of how we can kind of steer this class to make sure that it's helping you get to where you want to go. So I'll start. I'm Dr. Logan Park. I got my PhD from Virginia Tech, and on the label it says forestry. But for those of you who are at the PhD level, you understand that that is way too broad a label. So even at the master's level, you're starting to specialize into a much more specific area and become essentially a master of that sub-area within your topical discipline. So for me, that sub-area is human recreation ecology. That is, I study the dynamics of how we impact ecosystems at national forests and national parks and places like those. And I work with those agencies to figure out, how do we have 2, 3, 400 million visitors a year, every year, and not have the place completely destroyed in a year or two, right? So the Grand Canyon is made out of bedrock. And we can absolutely wreck places like the Grand Canyon by kind of loving them to death, or trampling them. So that is my particular area. I came to that through chemistry. Decided I didn't like doing a bunch of lab work for the rest of my life, and took a year off after undergraduate, hiked the Appalachian Trail, figured out that this forestry thing is a good balance of indoor and outdoor, and I can actually do some good instead of developing products for other rich people, and made the switch. So I've been here since 2009, done research projects kind of all over the Western Hemisphere, mostly in the United States, but all across it, including in Hawaii and Alaska. I'm very proud of those. And one of my particular joys is writing really good recommendation letters, or providing good reference phone calls, or trying to network with my network on behalf of my students. That's what keeps me going through the stress of writing research proposals and stuff like that. But I also love discovering things that have been sitting in front of me my whole life, and uncovering them or organizing my thoughts about them through the apparatus of research. It's a really cool time to be in recreation ecology. Things are changing and growing really rapidly. It's the Wild West in my field. So that's me. I'll start with you. We'll kind of work this way.
Sure. Yeah. Hello everyone. My name is Chibueze. I'm Nigerian. I'm in my second semester. I'm a major in forestry, specialization in hydrology. I'll be working on the Kincaid project, where I tend wider technology to kind of oversee the landscape and the impact of gully erosions on the Kincaid Lake, right? The amount of sediment they dump in Kincaid Lake. So that's what basically what I'm looking at in my project.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
LiDAR is a really fun tool. And you get to buy really expensive computers that process those point clouds into a fancy gaming computer. Anyway.
Yeah, I'm AJ. It's my first semester as a master's. My advisor is Brent Pease in forestry, and my project is working with the invasive Burmese pythons in South Florida and using collared possums as a means to capture and remove those pythons from the habitat. And I've actually done a good chunk of my field work already, because I was working in Crockett Lake National Wildlife Refuge, and that's how I got this grad school opportunity, because they had a grad student already working there, and I worked on her project, and they're like, oh, we like you, would you like to do this? So it worked out nicely for me. So I already have a few months of data already collected to start, so I got a little head start, and
All right. Cool.
My name is Šarūnas. I'm from Lithuania. My supervisor is Charles Schaffner. I'm working PhD level prescribed fire category. At this moment I'm working on a thesis which is generally dendrochronology, so for fire scars identification and analysis, cross-dating, and what can I say? My second semester is PhD.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm Asia. Hello. Your project sounds awesome, by the way. I am actually with the School of Human Sciences, and so my advisor is Tina Colson. Yeah. My background is in adventure education, and I'm studying recreation administration, but I kind of dabbled because of wham. I work on A Touch of Nature, and so my project is in conjunction with our master plan, and so I'm looking at outdoor education centers at the collegiate level specifically, and I am considering going the PhD route because of my background in adventure education and experiential learning.
Very cool. It's good to have somebody over from the rec program.
Yeah.
Once again.
I'm
Awesome.
excited to be here.
Excellent. Awesome.
My name's Noah. I did my forestry undergraduate here, and I'm getting my master's in forestry too, but it's not really forestry related, it's more of like agriculture. There's like a 10-year or so ongoing project at SIU Farms that I'm kind of taking over, and we're looking at cover crops and how different species and their interactions with tillage practices affect nitrate leaching and phosphorus stratification. So I have very big shoes to fill. There was a postdoc who had this project before me, so I'm very nervous that I'm doing things right and all that fun stuff. But I don't plan to get a PhD. I didn't even plan to get a master's degree, but it's very interesting as of now. So I might change my mind later on, but for now I think I'd just like to be a hydrologist or a forester once I'm done here.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, great. So we've got a pretty good breadth of topic areas, like we saw last week, and importantly, there's not a single area that is sort of overrepresented, like that particular muscle in our semester here, the body of our semester here, is not going to be hyperatrophied or hypertrophied. Yeah, anyway. We're going to need to balance qualitative and quantitative methods because we have a full range represented. So quantitative geospatial work, working with human beings and facilities, as well as natural phenomena. So that keeps things interesting. We're going to have a lot of good discussions, and we want to try and, like we were talking about on Thursday, take a close look at all the different method areas that we're going to talk about at sort of a concept level, not like going through and doing labs in each other's areas and that sort of thing. But again, we want to look for and get good at looking for what's the strength of this technique, what's the cost of this technique, what are the risks of this technique, what's my risk exposure with it, and what are the genuine drawbacks of this technique, what are its blind spots. And with those 4 questions, we'll be able to get a good sense of how your tool set, especially as a PhD, is as wide as you need it to be. We're answering a lot of questions, and sometimes your data gathered under a specific sort of worldview, a philosophy of science, that sort of thing, aims you at a different kind of research to answer the immediate follow-on questions, like a statistical analysis out of a detailed statistical model ends up raising a thoroughly non-statistical question about the people that are driving that forest or watershed phenomenon, for example. And half the fun of being a scientist is kind of improvising a little bit as you go, but in very highly reasoned and well-supported ways. One of the marks of a PhD is that you're not just using tools and techniques that other people have developed, you're also developing them out of necessity because you're doing sometimes some things that nobody has ever done before, maybe in that particular context or with that research subject, maybe not in that particular geographic or time context. And you need to be able to take things, take tools at least, and adapt them or invent them for your own use as you go. That's a lot of fun if you have kind of a hacker mindset. If you're more of a closed-ended linear thinker, like just tell me what I got to do and I'm a really good worker and let's get there, we have a lot to talk about with you as well. For those of us who are putting together our first major proposals, this document is one of those tools. So a template is just filled with boilerplate. This template, stick with me here, is 42 pages long. How many of you guys and gals have ever written something where the outline for it is 42 pages long? Awesome.
No, it's not.
But think about the accomplishment of it. Think about what you're capable of. Wow. That's amazing. So this is a whole bunch of page breaks in there. It's not actually 42 pages of text. Your thesis, for those of you writing a thesis, is typically going to be from anywhere from about 30 to 75 pages of text. And that sounds a little bit more reasonable than 42 just in the outline. But again, there are a bunch of page breaks in here, so it's not 42 pages of text. Let's kind of run through this fairly quickly. We'll come back to this document in a couple of future class sessions, but I want to get the ball rolling right away so that we can spread out and break down the steps needed to fill this in with your project, or fill in an outline that is better tailored to your project, not this one, whatever you like, as early as possible. So the more time we give ourselves throughout the semester, the smaller our chunks of work can be, and that's a very healthy and sane approach. Okay? So we want to make sure that we are looking at this from both the content perspective, the structure perspective, and then also the technical tools perspective of Microsoft Word as your drafting instrument. All right, so I've got the document styles defined along the lines of what the grad school wants. So one of our most important life, survival, and sanity skills as a researcher is to write with the end product in mind. So your thesis proposal, 100% of that should be copied and pasted when you're done with the proposal into your thesis or dissertation. You should not ever be rewriting the beginning of the document for the second form of the document, that is the thesis or dissertation following the proposal. And this is not particularly revelation, right? Like, we don't want to just rewrite anything, so of course we copy paste, and that's pretty easy these days. But that's a relatively new mindset in research, and there is some potential justification for folks who are total masochists and don't have any deadlines to rewrite the first couple of chapters of the thesis or dissertation, which are exactly the same content as all of the chapters of your proposal. Your proposal is like the first half or third of your eventual final document. Because in both of them you have to establish, what am I going to research? Why am I going to research it? How am I going to research it? In pretty much that order, right? So, introduction, literature review to provide context and establish importance, and also establish what is not known about your project. And then the third major chapter in your proposal is going to be, what do I propose to do, and how do I propose to do it, the methods. And we'll have short sort of vestigial sections after that, like anticipated results. Well, we always anticipate that you're going to have some results, right? So we should really say there. But some advisors really like to see that sort of a thing. We'll also have some stuff in the proposal that sometimes doesn't make it into the final document, but usually gets thrown in as an appendix because you put in the work, you might as well get the visibility for it. Things like the timeline, so the calendar, semester by semester, of what you're going to do and when and where. Things like a budget and any sort of placeholders for approvals like human subjects committee for any eventual research you might do, or like the IACUC, the Animal Research Oversight Board here at SAU, the institutional review boards, as they're called. We'll talk more about that bureaucracy and what to do with that as we go. All right, so this is just kind of a title and cover page, and the document is, again, more or less extracted out of the templates that the graduate school provides. So if you haven't done so already, one thing you want to do is go to the gradschool.siu.edu website and download all of the template files and the sort of 50 or 60 page long sort of advice packet they have for writing your thesis or dissertation. And what that's going to do is save you work in having to reformat things. It'll walk you through on what does the format of my table of contents need to look like. And in this class, we'll go through how to generate that table of contents once automatically so that you don't have to type any of that stuff up. It's just extracted from the document in an automated way, and you don't have to retype page numbers and stuff like that. It's all just done for you. So when I have advice to you that won't show up in your document as actual text, then that's in italics throughout this document. So you can scan through and just delete those pages. So the page count goes down briefly when you start working with this document, and then it goes back up as you put in your actual content. Let's see. So our title page, the graduate school is extremely particular about this. You're going to get your eventual thesis or dissertation defended, edited to satisfy the needs of your committee members, answer their questions, make their revisions, and then you turn it into grad school, and they don't care about the content at all. You could be writing about clown shoes for 200 pages. It doesn't matter to them, but they absolutely need all of these, for some reason, to be in exactly the same typographic format. So, download those files. They're linked off of the front page on the grad school. Yeah.
Something I've noticed is that the Word docs that is included with our emails don't have the same features as like a regular Word docs.
Uh-huh.
Does that matter? Does that come up? I've experienced it before, but with
Features
formatting-
like what?
There's just a couple like line spacing.
Oh, okay.
There's automatic features, and some of the line spacing options aren't the same with both the email version and the
Okay.
regular doc
Like how much white
version.
space after a figure, for example?
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
it one line single spaced? Is it one line double spaced? Is it
Well, the
two
one
line
line-
single spaced?
They're all different.
Yeah.
Like you'll say the single space, but then it shows up as a double, but then when you print it, it's funky. It gets really weird. I've too many times, and so I do wonder if the graduate school looks at that kind of thing.
They do. My wife just finished her PhD in neuroscience last May, so it can be done. But we noticed some of those as well, and she's a very sort of organized, squared away, particular person, and got pretty frustrated with that. As it turns out, when you turn in your final document, they care more about the consistency. They want it in their format as close as you can make it, and then within that, everything has to be very, very consistent. So I'll show you guys and gals, if you haven't ever done this before, how to define document and object styles to apply all of that formatting automatically and perfectly consistently. And once you apply a style to a chunk of text, or to a graph, or to an image or illustration or whatever, you can right-click on that style preview right here and go to select all X instances of it. And then if you need to modify them, you modify all of them all at once, and it takes like 30 seconds to a minute instead of like 45 minutes of scrolling through a 200-page document with all of its appendices and stuff like that. Yeah, question?
Yeah, so if I understand correctly, if everyone are aware of this current situation, does it mean that just, how to say it, 0 questions asked and follow the protocol?
Yes.
Got it, Roger.
Yeah. So the person that you're turning your eventual final document into is named Dr. Rose Moroz, and she is an amazing human being. Be her friend. Take good care of her. She's the one you need to make happy. And she's genuinely a cool person and very good at what she does. She is also, or she and her staff of essentially graduate students are entirely responsible for intaking what? Several hundred theses and dissertations over the course of about 3 weeks at the end of each semester. So she's a busy person. And she may not remember or notice the difference between all of your figures have 2 single-spaced lines after them before text resumes, or not, but she will notice, or her staff will notice, if it's not perfectly consistent throughout. So we'll talk about just some editing techniques to make sure that that process is as painless or as pain managed as it can be, because it's a lot, right? And it can be even emotionally exhausting to wrangle a document this big, even especially if your laptop is older and it's a little bit slower and there's a lot of lag and stuff like that. Okay, so all I have to say, I took those template files and added a complete structure and framework all the way through for both theses and dissertations. They're exactly the same. A dissertation has more repeated sections throughout. So, for example, your thesis, if you're writing a thesis, you'll typically have your front matter chapters and then essentially a journal article manuscript that you're going to send off for publication after you graduate and so forth, and then all of your appendices. A dissertation is literally exactly that, but instead of one journal article manuscript in there, you've got the front matter, journal manuscript 1, 2, typically 3, and then all of the appendices after that. Okay? So it's just more of the same thing, so we can use the same template for both. It's just a rinse and repeat on that format. Okay? So you fill in the highlighted fields, and you want to understand that the grad school, because we are an accredited organization, you can't just put stuff in here that sort of sounds right and makes sense. It has to be strictly exactly what the Illinois Board of Higher Accreditation has signed off on in terms of what is the name of your PhD program. So we don't give forestry PhD degrees here in the forestry and horticultural program. It's an agricultural sciences PhD, even though you're just within the forestry program and so forth. It's weird, it's dumb, but that stuff will trigger a copy back to you with, hey, you need to fix this before we can say yes. Okay? So, anyway, fill all that stuff in, and there are a couple of optional pages in there. Your work is automatically enrolled in copyright protection, at least in the United States. It is not trademarked or patented. Those are 3 separate intellectual property protections. And you can file for the others as they apply. But you can, if you want to, have a page that says, hey, I wrote this, and by the way, just to remind everybody, this really is my work. And there's some standard template file available for that. Okay? It's just a bunch of legal boilerplate language. And then the approval page is a form that you will be working for. This is currently broken across a couple pages with the extra comments and stuff in there, but it's all on one page. This is the document that your committee members are all going to sign at the end of your successful defense and seminar in your final semester. So that a copy of that on archival quality, acid-free, heavyweight cotton paper goes into your printed dissertation, and a PDF version of it gets inserted as a page in the digital PDF of it. Then you have to put the abstract, which is a very specific thing, and you're never going to write an abstract ever again after this class. You're going to write the document and then copy-paste the most important key sentences throughout that document into the abstract. The abstract is not an introduction, it's a summary. It's a very, very short summary. And so this is a good life skill to find the key sentences in your document, usually the topic sentence of the most important paragraphs, and just put those in one by one in the order that you find them, and that's your abstract. It requires a little bit of light editing from that point, but that's about it. And that will be a valuable skill for hitting the different abstract and proposal word count limitations that you come across. So for example, the dissertation or thesis abstract can be kind of as long as you need. It's typically up to about 3 pages, anywhere from a half page to about 3 pages long, just depending on your level of detail and writing style. And from there, we get into basically having to write the exact same thing to propose that you give a 15-minute talk or an hour-long lecture or whatever at a professional conference, or to present a poster. You don't send the whole thing. You send typically a 100 to 250 word shortened abstract for that. And then all of those abstracts get collected and published as part of the output of that conference. And you get the citation on your CV or resume, or curriculum vitae, a long-form resume, out of getting that talk or whatever it is accepted at the conference. So, an executive summary is something that you may also be asked to write by your particular research group or advisor. An executive summary is not the same thing as the abstract, but it's just a sort of different kind of copy-paste. So if the abstract is meant to communicate to other scientists, an executive summary would be to connect or communicate with managers and practitioners in your field who are not researchers. So they don't care about all the cool statistical methods and stuff like that. They just want a button to push to fix whatever problem you were researching. So the executive summary has a much, much heavier focus on the discussion, and in particular the conclusion section of your paper or your document. Okay? But if your advisor needs an executive summary for your project sponsor, for me that would be a report out to the National Park Service or Forest Service or whatever, and they do not want to see abstracts, they want to see executive summaries. Your advisor should be able to help you map that out. In this class, we're not going to really worry about executive summaries because you got to have your data collected and analyzed and interpreted in order to be able to craft a good, meaningful executive summary. So we won't get too far into that. We would delete all of this italic stuff again and title your abstract very specifically, and then put the content of the abstract in there. And then we get into the sort of more particular front matter stuff. So the acknowledgments, folks that you want to thank that are not co-authors of your document. So keep this typically pretty short, a couple of pages. Keep it professional. You don't want to be giving shout outs to your pookie or bookie, as the youth say these days. It's more of a Dr. So-and-so, extended me great kindness when she let me use this particular piece of equipment in her lab, or, researcher two so-and-so in the forestry department let me use her $5,000 computer to do a bunch of LiDAR point cloud generation and surface skinning. And I couldn't have done my project without him. Thank you guys so much.
Okay, what needs to be professionally acceptable if I will write it like that? Thank you very much for following people and yada 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 yada.
Yeah, that's fine. Just a
Okay,
long
so-
list of people? Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Right. Yeah, the truth is that so many people are helping us, field technicians gathering data for you, agency partners working with you to provide data, stuff like that. Like, if you're fully explaining what everybody does, that's a very long section, and we can actually get lost in a little bit too much detail, if that makes sense. So in order to keep the focus on the people, and not on the myriad list of everything that everybody has done, usually it's closer to a list like that, yeah. The dedication can be to your Pookie or Bookie. Don't use those words. But if a spouse or life partner or your parents, some people dedicate it to a particular spiritual belief or practice, keep this as an epigraph, nice and short and high impact.
Is it required to have a dedication?
No. No, acknowledgements, dedication, copyright, those are not necessary. Your abstract page absolutely is. And then from there, we get into the stuff that's really not necessary and is much more rare, except in some dissertations. So the foreword is something that is written by somebody else about your document and you. The preface is written by you about your research project and this document. Okay? They are different things. They serve slightly different purposes.
Excuse me, so
Yeah.
those two stuff, they are mandatory or they are optional?
These are optional, yeah. And none of these, except for the abstract, would be present typically in a proposal because the project's not done yet, right? We don't have a lot of people to thank maybe yet. But you definitely do want to keep that list. Okay? And then from there we get into the table of contents. And as you can see, these are highlighted in gray because these are auto-generated fields. You never, ever, ever want to put yourself in the position of having to type this and adjust those numbers because they're going to change continuously as you go. Right through the last day when you send it off to Rosemarose the final time. Importantly, when you right-click on it or alt-click if you're a Mac person and click Update Field, you can choose to update just the page numbers only, so you can format this and then just update page numbers, or you can update the entire table so it scans through the entire document and rebuilds this whole list. And we'll see how that works in a future class session to keep things nice and tidy for today. But as you can see, there are a lot of sections in a thesis or dissertation, and so particular sub-tables of contents, like the list of tables, every single one of your tables and its page number and its title, the list of figures, the list of equations, and the table of authorities. If you have any legal documents that your project references, like any Illinois statutes or whatever that are super important to your research project maybe, that's less common outside of the law school, but there are 4 different kinds of sub-tables of contents for your eventual thesis or dissertation. So I'll show you how to generate, insert, and maintain all of those. Okay, cool. And after all of that, we're like, I don't even know how many pages in, 16 pages in, now you finally get to saying what you're going to say instead of telling us what you're going to say. It's like an old Baptist sermon, right? Tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them what you told them. Okay. Beginning, middle, and end, right? The introduction is broken out into smaller sections that are in pretty much standard order. And this is to basically, in a recognizable way to a bunch of folks who have written a bunch of these, sort of lay out your argument and the case for what you want to do or what you have done. I don't know why that word is formatted differently. Anyway, so we've got not necessarily these specific section titles. So this is your chapter title, and that's a heading 1 style. So that shows up in the table of contents. A heading 2 style, you can see the highlight moving from chip to chip. The heading 2 style also is set up to show up in this particular table of contents. You can set the document to only do level 1, level 2, level 3, whatever. But you want to introduce what is the general context of your problem. Sort of the Declaration of Independence, right? When in the course of human events it becomes blah, blah, blah. This is the large scale, large focus, broad introduction. And then from there into the background. What is the ancient history, the broad social context, and then maybe the next paragraph or next page, you want to do, what's the medium scope focus, all right? So what's been done sort of in the last 50 years on this topic? And then the end of that paragraph transitions, or that page transitions into a type focus on what's the specific, very recent, spatially local, culturally local context of your particular project. This is all stuff that other people have described for you in their research projects, so there are going to be some citations here. Okay? So, once we know what the general, the meso, and the local and recent context of whatever the issue is that you're broadly studying, Python, invasive pythons, outdoor rec, facility management issues, whatever it is, maybe you start talking about the field of recreation management, and then by this third page or paragraph, whatever it is, you're talking specifically about what's going on at Touch of Nature. What's an issue or a problem or a concern or something we just don't know a lot about at the specific type context. So broad to specific, inverted triangle format. And that brings you straight to the problem statement. What exactly is the issue? So the problem statement section is usually pretty short because it doesn't take a lot to identify the fact that, okay, these pythons are absolutely wrecking face across South Florida ecosystems in some specific and pretty deleterious ways. So, problem statement, typically a page, maybe less. I'm going to state the problem clearly, a sentence or two, so that we don't have to go digging for this. If your project is so important that you and maybe other people in your research group are dedicating like a couple of years of your life to researching even just one part of, well, then we want to know exactly what that problem is. So keep it clear and concise. Concise writing is very hard to do. So this is one that you want to kind of slow down on and work on pretty early, because everything else has to flow necessarily from this, right? Without a clear sense of the problem, it doesn't matter what you're sort of looking for, compiling for your huge literature review chapter, because that may or may not be relevant to that specific problem. And you don't want to spend any more effort on stuff that is not relevant than you have to, okay? So, state the problem, then establish the importance of this project. What's its cost in money, in ecological structure and function, in human capital, in social development, in personal development? Is this like kind of an annoyance for a few people, or is this like shaping the direction of humanity's next 50 years, right? So don't overinflate like it's pretty obvious when somebody's full of hot air on the importance of the project, but also don't understate it, right? You are spending a couple of your irretrievable years of your life to hammer on solving this problem, or at least understanding it better. So say that, you know? What are the stakes involved? What are the consequences of this project if we don't accomplish this? And then transition statement into the project justification. So we have a problem, here's what it is, here's how bad it is. That is justification for this project. Spending sponsors' money, spending your life, and so on and so forth. What are the benefits of this study, or the potential benefits? And then transition into your comprehensive literature review, or start setting that up. Your research question or hypothesis pairs are a very specific distillation of, so given the problem, given its severity and its impact on us as people or on our planet or what have you, and our justification for the project, given those things, what am I trying to find out with this project? What am I trying to analyze, and so forth? Okay? Now, I believe this section is actually copy-pasted down into the end of the literature review. Some people, or your advisor, will have usually a strong opinion on, I want the research question or hypothesis right after the justification because that makes sense. It flows narratively to give us context, problem, justification, what we're going to do, and then start talking about literature review. Other advisors, equally valid, say, no, we can't know our research question until we know what everybody else has done first because we don't want to duplicate somebody else's effort unless, as a part of science, we are trying to duplicate somebody's efforts to test their work, right? That's part of how science works. Yeah.
Excuse me, I kind of now brain shocked. How the hell is it even possible? You're making something, trying to figure out something, and you're formulating a hypothesis only on the very end because you are afraid that. What?
That's how some people organize it, yeah. So it's not my place to judge, you know. I'm just presenting
sorry that
kind of the
I'm
two
very
primary ways. Yeah.
I'm sorry for my judgmental
No.
emotional expression.
No,
but
that's
it's
fine.
kind of confusing. How are you going to concentrate your efforts? How are you going to make your plan of actions? How are you going to prioritize your actions if you don't even know your hypothesis which you want to solve? How the hell is it even possible? Because basically on a hypothesis we believe in everything. If you have a hypothesis A, you're not checking hypothesis B just because someone tried something similar on hypothesis A already. How? How the hell is that even possible to organize your plan of actions, or prioritize your actions, structurize your work, and how to say it, evaluate necessary resources? Because basically everything is based on the hypothesis. So how it's possible to do anything without hypothesis first? I'm sorry for my honest opinion, but I'm just shocked.
You're allowed to have opinions in this class.
Yeah. So can you please explain me how it's working actually?
Yeah, so you used a very important action verb, doing. In describing everything that you do comes from hypotheses. How could you do things in this order? All of the doing, all of it, is in the methods chapter after this every time. Some disciplines will even put hypotheses into the methods section, but early in the methods section. Because some people like to tell the complete story through the literature review and then establish their hypotheses. Some people like to frame it as, here are our research questions or our hypotheses that come from those research questions. And then here is the story of why we're asking these questions in this way, in this context, using these tools that we will tell you about in chapter 3, our methods. It's just opinion. It's just opinion. As long as the doing stuff always comes after those hypotheses or research questions, then it's kind of okay either way. It's just how you prefer to write, how it makes sense to organize the narrative in your mind.
Thank you.
Yeah. These are genuinely competing formats, but they're just formats, you know?
Mhm.
All the content is the same either way, right? So don't worry about it too much. Just pick one and kind of go with it for now. You can always change later. The way that we're organizing our efforts this semester is we're not actually going to do like writing sentences and stuff like that until much later, about the halfway point in the semester. We're going to intentionally keep this document at the outline level so that you can do things like cut and paste sections and move, you know, chunks of a chapter around without really having to re-wordsmith the actual sentences and text. That's pretty important. We want to keep our workflow in that order. All right? So when we get to the literature review, this is, again, typically following the general to specific, oldest to most recent, and ending with the most important and most targeted and most relevant body of theory or previous work that has been done by you or others. So, we want to have a progression. If you have like 3 big bodies of theory, in human behavioral theory, we have something like the theory of reasoned action, which was super old. And then from that was developed the theory of planned behavior. So I'm going to talk about the old introductory one first, because it's an easier way to understand that particular set of theories, that family of theories. And then we'll say, okay, this is awesome and useful for sort of that first step into this area if you've never thought about it before. It's also, half of it's kind of bullshit and doesn't make sense. So the more recent body of theory, even by some of the same authors, is called the theory of planned behavior. And by the end of talking about the theory of planned behavior, maybe 2 pages for this theory, 5, 6 pages for this one, a bunch of studies that have looked at different aspects of the body of theory, or the history of research around your research area, the history of research around the techniques that you're using and stuff like that. When we get to the end of the literature review, we have a pretty clear sense that you know everything that could possibly impact your study. How it's done, what previous people have done, what they found, what you disagree with out of other people's previous conclusions out of what they found. You can say, this was a great study, but they're wrong, and here's why. And maybe here's how they're wrong, and this is why they are wrong part is your study, is your research question. So in that case, the narrative makes sense to put those research questions, those hypothesis pairs, into the end of the literature review. Once we know everything that is known, you're starting to describe, we know all of this stuff, but we don't know this. And wouldn't you know it, my study is right there. We're asking this. Like, this is a really important question. We know because it's been justified already. Okay, so the literature review has a very clear structure and order and sequence. It's not just a big pile of, I found these 75 papers and here they are in sort of alphabetical order. You know, good luck getting through that. It should be actually kind of an enjoyable or mentally stimulating read through sort of the top to bottom, start to finish progression of where did we start on what we know about this and what do we know now and what are we lacking on what we know now. Okay, so early theory, recent more targeted theory, so maybe macro theory, macroeconomics, down to a microeconomic theory model of your particular spot of question, and the most recent development, and then those research questions or hypotheses. Put them in one or the other spot, not both. And then you're already into chapter 3, methodology, which tends to be a much shorter chapter. You can think of your methods section or your chapter as a really big recipe. What do you need? How are you gonna set it up? Where are you gonna do this? And what's the step-by-step on making the souffle of your research? Okay. And so our template here has a bunch of smaller, much more specific sections for this methodology chapter than your literature review does, because the literature review is going to be wildly different for each of you. The methods probably going to look mostly pretty similar in its structure and order and flow. Okay, so we need to know stuff like, what's your site description and study area? Within that, what's the spatial, social, ecological, and or the time scope as relevant? Put your site maps here early on to establish where you're going. Okay, a couple of good figures go a really long way. And I'll show you guys how to apply styles to figure objects to format them properly for the grad school and all that stuff, and then also figure captioning and how to format those so that they show up automatically in that list of figures, list of tables, whatever that thing is, okay? Then for statistical studies or quantitative or spatial studies, what's your sampling design? Is this a census? Is it a sample? Is it a randomized multi-stage cluster sample? Is it a non-representative sample? Is it for a qualitative study, a single case study, or a paired case study? What's your sampling design? What's the basis under which, or the ontology, how you understand reality and truth under which you are collecting data? What are your delimitations? What are the fences that you are putting around your project? Not limitations, delimitations. Saying, we know there are X number of counties in South Florida that have a huge Burmese python problem. This study is about this county because we can accomplish that. And the other counties are right next door. What we find here is probably generalizable to those other counties nearby without incurring the cost and extra labor and time of surveying all 11 of those horribly messed up counties. Okay? Cool. All right, sorry this text is so small. What are your objectives? So objectives are the in order list of things that you got to accomplish one by one. What's your task list? Kind of a meso level. And then timeline. Be hugely overestimate how long everything's going to take, because everything takes longer than you think it will. And that's okay. That's normal. You're starting to cultivate your sense of time awareness and how much time certain things will take. And it's okay if you have multiple things in parallel during a particular semester. Okay? Then your data collection procedures, field procedures, interview procedures, survey, etc. Here now that we know the particulars of how you're going to do what you're going to do, now let us know what the limitations are. Okay, we were unable, or we think we will be for a proposal, unable to get XYZ subpopulation into our sampling frame to mail out surveys to them because none of them have mailing addresses and everybody else does. So we know we're just going to miss some folks who are unhomed or transitory or just culturally migratory. And for your proposal, list out, as far as you understand it so far, the kinds of analyses you're going to do. You don't have to list every statistical test or every tool in Hoth's tools from ARC. I don't even know if Hoth's tools is still a thing, and so forth. All right? And so on down the list. I've got a bunch of examples for you, and that's kind of it. We'll have big lists of work cited. And that's it. We're over time a little bit, so I gotta let you go. But I'll have this on the course website for you. Download a copy, and see you on Thursday. We'll ask about those research notebooks we didn't have time to today. I'm around for questions if you have them. Otherwise, we'll see you on Thursday. Yeah.
Just shortly checking. Everything go from this lecture will be available on the D2L, yeah?
Yes. Uh-huh. Yeah, I don't want you to have to invent this, so give it away.